Hello, I'm Adam,
I'm Adrian.
and welcome to Cast from the Crypt. Today we fall down the Shyamalan hole once again with what is his latest movie, came out this year, the year of our Lord 2023. Knock at the Cabin. Knock at the Cabin. It was based on a book by... Do you know the author?
Yeah, it's Paul G. Tremblay.
There you go.
He wrote The Cabin at the End of the World.
There you go. Yeah. So right off the bat, okay, I've suffered, and I truly suffered through M. Night's work in recent years. I am sorry to this man, but we watched Old, and that came out last year or the year before.
No, 2021.
Okay, 2021. Yeah, so 2 years ago, and that movie was like, oh, just awful, just unbelievably awful. And this movie, I'm shocked that was the same director, you know? Like, if I didn't know who Night Shyamalan was.
Yes.
Some pretty good performances in this movie off the bat. Rupert Grint and Dave Bautista are the biggest names in this movie, and easily, for me, the best performances.
Well, hold on.
Oh, okay.
The theater community would be aghast at that comment, because Jonathan Groff is in this movie.
Jonathan Groff could die. He could die for all I care. Along with the theater community. Do you know who that is? Jonathan Groff is. Nah, I don't know who that is.
Oh, dude, he's a big deal, like a huge deal.
Okay, well,
on like Broadway.
And guess what? He was all right. You know, he wasn't bad, but he was not. He was fine. I think he was kind of overshadowed.
Yeah, he was. I got to agree there.
Yeah,
but I thought he was good.
What's he known for, Jonathan Groff? Like, what's he been
in? Well, most recently he was in Hamilton, but he was the king in Hamilton.
Oh.
But he got popular after he played this character named Melchior in Spring Awakening, which ran on Broadway for a couple years. And he won a Tony for Best Leading Actor.
What is Melchior? What is... Oh, that's one of the three wise men.
Really?
Yeah, it's Balthazar, Melchior, and Casper.
Well, there you go.
Merry Christmas.
And he's got a few Tonys. He's got like 2 Tonys or maybe even more. And he's got a couple Grammys, and he's a prolific Broadway dude.
Okay, well, I'll put some more respect on his name. I do apologize.
No, I was just messing with you, but
I kind of hate that. I kind of hate that he's a big theater guy. I wish that wasn't true.
I know. Well, look, prolific theater guy working with prolific director. I completely agree with you. This movie feels so different from Old, which only came out 2 years ago. But the thing with M. Night is that people forget this man puts them out. Like, he's already put out 2 movies in the 2020s. In the 2010s, he put out 5 or 6. In the 2000s, he put out 5 or 6. Like, the guy works a lot. And I think he's invited in his long career some rushed and piss poor projects to be direct.
You're being really nice, yeah. Yeah, maybe he slowed down and, like, smelled the air or something with this one, because this one makes sense. It is also, like I said, noteworthy that this is based on a book. All right, there wasn't room for him to throw in a dumb plot twist, because there was already a plot lined out, you know? So not to discredit him.
Loosely based.
But he had a map, if you will, to make this movie.
Fair.
And so, not to discredit him, he directed this movie. He, I think, did the screenplay, didn't he?
He did, along with Steve Desmond and Michael Sherman.
Yeah, so like he was active in this movie and he made it happen. All right, so regardless of if it's an adaptation or not, but he did have that original kind of blueprint. The main plot of this movie, the premise, I'll say quickly, is that this family in the woods, they're in like a cabin, they're vacationing. 4 strangers with crazy homemade weapons show up and tie them up. It's that home invasion horror, and they all have seen visions of the apocalypse, and the only way the apocalypse won't happen is if one of these family members kills another one. And the whole movie, spoiler I guess, but like they're not full of it. Like they really are trying to prevent the apocalypse. And so it kind of does have this plot twist of like, are they right? They're a crazy cult, but actually the twist is that it's real. Everything they say is true. but it's not really a twist. Like, you know that the entire time. So it's kind of like got that M. Night subversion, but it's a little more subtle and it's a little less like plot twist, slap you in the face. You know, it can be subversive and also not be surprising. And I'm glad he learned to tone it down.
I 100% agree. This movie, I thought it and probably said it several times because when we saw it, I think we were in an empty theater. But which is
Poor
telling.
M. Night.
Right. But I was thinking, man, I don't think there's going to be any insane twist. Like, I don't think he's going to do it this time. And he didn't. And that is what has dragged down so many of his most recent projects. Well, actually, so many of his projects in general. You know, The Village sticks out to me, though that one's popular and kind of controversial. People are on either side of that one. The Happening, Split, Glass, all those movies are just bogged down by his need to make the audience go, what? And it's just not here. It's straightforward. And you're right, still subversive in its own special way. But for me, I really enjoyed this movie. And frankly, I will admit, I think I probably enjoyed it more than I would have if it was another director. But for me, this was a reminder that M. Night Shyamalan can make a movie that's fun to watch, engaging, and doesn't leave you pissed off. And that's why I think I enjoyed it so much and have recommended it to people because it stands for something. Like, for me, this is not just a movie. It is really more so redemption for M. Night Shyamalan because it's a good movie. I think it's a good movie.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was a fun and entertaining watch. It's a different take on the home invasion movie. It's not just someone invades the home and they're evil and murderous. Like, that's been done plenty of times. We didn't need to see it again. So I'm glad we have something a little bit different. And it was a relatively small cast with good performances. Dave Bautista, I know, has said before that he doesn't want to be remembered as the Guardians of the Galaxy guy. And so he's done other work that I feel like you can kind of tell he is putting care into. And in this role, like, he does a really good job. I really enjoyed him in this movie. He felt just in character.
I think Batista's great in this movie. In fact, I feel that he has really grown as an actor. I know that when he started Guardians of the Galaxy, in that first film, or excuse me, after that first film came out and he was on the press circuit, he talked about how after wrestling, he started taking classes and was actively trying to improve as an actor. And I saw it a little bit in his very short appearance in Blade Runner 2049, but I've since really seen it in his work, namely Glass Onion and also this movie. Glass Onion, of course, just came out late last year, and this movie early this year. So I've seen him. I've seen him grow as an actor, and I really appreciate him in this movie. And I like the guy. You know, I like to see him do well too. It's cool. It's cool to see him grow.
Yeah, well, I'm glad he also, like, cares about his craft, because it would have been easy to be the funny guy in a Marvel movie, take your money, and just forget about it. You know, just disappear with your money and not care. But no, he seems to really care about acting. He wants to be more than that, and I appreciate that. I'm glad.
It's nice to see somebody not just phone it in.
Yes, exactly.
And take the easy money.
Exactly. Another thing I loved about this movie. Home invasion movies are kind of usually just kind of like torture porn, you know? Like, it's just grotesque and disturbing, and usually doesn't really go anywhere with it. Usually does not have much to say, if anything. In this movie, does that, like, pit of your stomach horror of, like, man, these people are invading someone's home and you don't know what they're gonna do. And it keeps you held in that uncomfortable position, feeling that way for a really good part of the start of this movie. But then the plot continues past that and isn't just that. And so I like the way that they make you feel uncomfortable and sick without it only being that, you know? If that makes sense, if I'm not being too abstract. The movie opens with Dave Bautista, and his character he looks like the most serial killer you can imagine. He has the Jeffrey Dahmer glasses, a white button-up shirt, and he's got like tattoos all over his arms, and then just the way these scenes are shot just really highlight how huge of a guy they are. Like, the camera will be below him a little bit, especially in these scenes with Wen, the little girl, the daughter of this family. And they make him just seem so scary and intimidating. He's very gentle when he speaks, very comforting, but in this opening scene, it's this little girl playing in the woods near this cabin that her parents are in, and then just he shows up and is talking to this little girl and is like way too interested in this little girl. And this scene is just horrible in a good way, but like horrible. Like, it's so unsettling just to see a scary man get this interested in a stranger little girl. I don't know how you felt. I squirmed this entire time.
100%. And you know what's funny is there are movies that we never talked about. Spree, did we?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, okay, we did. There are movies. Honestly, that movie is so forgettable.
Yeah.
Here's my point. There are movies like Spree, for example, where they employ Joe Keery and they make Joe Keery the protagonist, but the audience is fooled into following this character as a protagonist because of preconceived notions and other roles that character has had. There are movies that do that purposefully, and there are movies that do that to their detriment. Spree comes to mind. I think it probably did it purposefully. Bernie, not really a horror movie, but I think also does that really well. They use Jack Black, who everybody loves, to highlight the sympathy that people had for this character in their community. Of course, these are all movies that this might mean nothing to you if you haven't seen them, but people know Dave Bautista. And I thought it was really, really ballsy to put him in a role like this. And as I was watching the scenes with Wen in the beginning, when he's towering over her and then, goes down to her level and is so close to her and is talking to her so intently, I thought to myself, this could really not be effective. And yet somehow it is. And I don't know if that's if I'm complimenting Bautista here or if I'm complimenting the camera work. They use these really tight frames, and they keep the camera really low, as you pointed out, to highlight his size. But God, you forget who this guy is. You forget that he's the funny guy in Guardians of the Galaxy. You forget that he's the famous pro wrestler. You forget all these things. I was really engrossed by his performance, and I bought every second of what this movie was serving me in the beginning. It's set up, right? I didn't know where they were going to take this, and my stomach was also churning.
I mean, well, you think he can have nothing but nefarious reasons to be talking to this little girl like this, and he
right,
in a way, did have nefarious reasons. And then you get that, like, okay, she goes back to her parents, tells them what's happening, and then these people show up and they're all trying to break in. And so it is like classic home invasion movie. And you as a viewer are like, oh man, what's going to happen? People wake up tied to chairs. Nothing good's going to happen. But then the rest of the movie is these kidnappers revealing themselves to be sympathetic and to be just normal people. They're forced to do something horrible, and they're trying to do it in the most humane way possible. And the other actors are pretty good too. Rupert Grint is not in it much. He dies pretty quickly.
Yeah, he dies early on.
But he's pretty emotional for the duration of his screen time. Well, the idea is that these 4 kidnappers are going to slowly kill each other, and they're not going to stop killing each other until until one of these family members decides to kill another one and prevent the apocalypse. So it's kind of like one more person's dead, one more person's dead. They're trying to pressure them into making this very difficult decision. And poor Rupert is the first one to go. So they don't show any of the gore. And that's another thing I think that separates this from just a torture porn home invasion movie. Is the typical home invasion movie, they'd show you every detail of that head getting smashed. But they cut away in this movie, which is fine because it works for this movie. This movie has more depth than that.
The reason I think it works is, these people who are immediately written off as cultists and homophobic cultists by the couple here, Eric and Andrew, I believe was his name, who I've also never seen in anything, much like a lot of these actors. Really, the only three I'm familiar with were Rupert Grint, of course, Dave Bautista, and Jonathan Groff. And I'm not even counting M. Night Shyamalan's infomercial cameo.
He made a cameo anyway. And he made it an actual cameo for once instead of being a character.
Yeah. Yes, that's the other dude. Yes, he wasn't important in this movie, which I thought was excellent.
Wasn't even named.
Thank you. Take the note, M. Night. Anyway, they're immediately written off, these people, as a homophobic cult, there to punish Eric and Andrew because, they've adopted this daughter and they're gay and yada, yada, yada. Unfortunately, they are also spouting this biblical stuff, doomsday and God's wrath and saying things like this that ultimately, of course, lead Eric and Andrew to put two and two together and assume the worst. They are presented that difficult decision that you described, right? Having to kill one or the other to save the planet. And when they don't do that, these folks have to kill each other. And I thought the cutaway was really effective because they don't just fade to black. They don't just cut to a wall with blood splatter. There's 1,000 ways you can do the cutaway when somebody's dying. But instead, they make you watch Eric, Andrew, and I think even at points Wen's reaction to these deaths and how they are wrestling with the fact that they don't believe these people because they've written them off, and yet they are also struggling with why exactly would these people be doing this then? Like, why are they killing themselves then? And that only gets worse and worse throughout the movie as more and more of them kill themselves. And I found that to be even more effective than the torture porn route. So I'm with you. I really enjoyed that. And again, showing that you can be subversive in certain ways and not just slap your balls on the table with a sloppy twist, which is what I think M. Night Shyamalan's done with more than half of his filmography at this point.
Yeah, I guess now that we're talking about these central characters, this family, Eric, Andrew, and Wen, I like how Dave Bautista's character ultimately being this very compassionate person is challenging your preconceived notions, is subverting your expectation for this huge creepy guy talking to a little girl. And in the same way you see this cult spouting biblical stuff, you assume that they're going to be doing some homophobic reasoning as to why they're doing this to these people, but the characters also have to assume this. They have to, because that's, the lives they've been conditioned to live. That's how they are going to view these people, because that's how the world has treated them. And so it's kind of nice to simultaneously believe these people, believe this cult, believe that yes, the apocalypse is going to happen and these people are genuine in what they're doing, but you also are seeing this from a position where you sympathize with the main characters. Like, they ultimately make the most sense. So, I don't know, there's a few elements of this movie that I don't know how to feel about, though. We get a bunch of flashbacks to points in Eric and Andrew's life together, and this fleshes their characters out, sure. Andrew is much more hostile to these invaders than Eric is. Eric is listening to them a lot more seriously, clearly, and then through a series of flashbacks, we start to understand why. Andrew was attacked in a bar because he was with Eric, and had since kind of become more paranoid and aggressive towards potential aggressors. And I like how M. Night Shyamalan does this. This is something he did really well in Signs, if you remember. How we'd flash back to seeing these characters live their lives, and then flash forward to the present situation, and this explains maybe some of their behavior and why they act this way. And that's, like, Signs, I think, is my favorite of his movie because it does stuff like that and really focuses on the characters, and I'm glad to see that he did not neglect any character in this movie as well.
Yeah, they all, to me, feel pretty well-rounded, and there wasn't really, something that I think ails a lot of his films, and not to bring up all of his sins whenever we talk about, like, one of his decent or good movies, but he does struggle with the annoying character thing, right? Where you've got an interesting protagonist or an interesting story, and then there's that like insufferable character. For me, this has been an issue in many of his films, and I don't feel the need to go into it too deep. But here, I thought they were all interesting, and I thought that all the actors did a decent job, and I thought that at the very least, this group of people, the characters are written to be from all different walks of life and being all sorts of different people. Yeah, it's a little on the nose. It's a little Saving Private Ryan, right? In that you've got like a character from every profession and every part of the U.S. But it is what it is, right? That's the nature of this kind of story. And, I bought it. Like, I bought what they were here to do. In fact, so much to the point that there was a period in the movie where I started to side with them, and I was like, come on, like, just make a decision.
Me too.
Like,
Me too. Like when bodies started piling up and like the apocalypse started happening and diseases were spreading and planes were falling out of the sky. That's when it was like, pick it up, guys. You gotta do something.
Yeah.
Pretty early on, I was like, okay, Andrew, you should shoot Eric. Sorry.
Andrew was so combative the entire film that he couldn't see it.
You get to understand why, at least. I think if they didn't give him that context, it wouldn't have made quite as much sense. He would have been a little less sympathetic. You wouldn't have liked the character as much,
Well, and it makes sense. It's the perfect story for 2023 because how much of these crazy religious conspiracies are we exposed to on a daily basis, right? This sort of stuff is so present, especially now with the internet. I won't go into all of the different theories that are out there and all of the different rabbit holes that people have fallen down in just the last 3 years alone, but also in the last 20 years, really post 9/11. And so I think this story being told at a time when this is so ingrained in our brains and we Americans, I should say, have seen the ramifications of conspiracy theories and such recently. I think you can also really see yourself in those characters because people find a way to fake everything. How many unreal things are people exposed to every day on their Facebook feeds? But because they look so real or because they sound so real or because they just hit the right chord in their heart, they believe it. And so on the one end, they get you really sympathizing with these two dads just trying to do their best. But on the other end, after a while in this movie, you start to really believe these other folks. And that is, of course, that's the movie, right? That's the point. But it's done well. It's done well. For me, there was a clear point in which I was like, yep, these guys have to do it. They have to make a decision. If not for the other in the relationship, for the kid, right? You're thinking about the kid. And Batista's character also brings up the child and her future. There's this, I think, a little ham-fisted flash forward in the movie. You know what I'm talking about, where I think Andrew sees Eric growing up with Wen in this like vision that he has. He's thinking about what could happen, or no, rather, he's describing it to Eric, what their life could be if he just makes this decision. This is after, of course, Andrew decides, okay, I'll do it. I'll let you do it. But that it's ham-fisted, and yet, dude, it got me. I don't know what it was, but it just after the build-up and the runtime, it hit me at the right moment, and I thought it was effective.
Were the tears welling up?
Not the tears, no tears, but definitely like emotions and thoughts. Like imagine being in this situation, imagine having really just starting a family, because Wen is so young, you get the sense that they went through a lot to adopt her, and they show that, right? It was very difficult. They've had a very difficult life as two gay men in America, and the fight to start that family, and now there's only one way that the family can move on, right? And it involves the death of one of you. It worked for me. It swelled in a way that I thought was really effective. And again, this might just be my bias because it's M. Night Shyamalan and I want him to succeed, but I thought it was effective, and I thought it was his best thing in a really, really long time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I can draw so many parallels between this and Signs. And
do it.
I guess that's okay. Well, another thing, I guess, there's this, of course, religious aspect of this movie. It's the apocalypse, biblical plagues and all. Yet, just like in Signs, where there's a huge religious element to the story, the movie is somehow still very neutral about it, Like, it is a biblical apocalypse, but you don't know why. You don't know why these characters are doing it. It maybe isn't religious in nature. Like, the mystery of these divine actions is still very much real, and it's more about the human element than the religious element. I've said so much good stuff about this movie, and I hope I've given off the impression that I really enjoyed it, because I did. But now...
No, I feel that.
Now I gotta criticize it. Now I gotta talk about the stuff... I don't even know if I'd say stuff I didn't like, but stuff I am conflicted about, I guess. So maybe...
I'm very curious.
Well, talking through it, maybe I'll come to a more concrete emotion, and you can help me get to where I need to be. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
no, I'm super curious to know what didn't work for you.
All
because
right.
so far...
For me, these two characters, Eric and Andrew, I really have trouble working around. Now I hate to compare it to Signs, because Signs, I'm realizing more and more, is a unique masterpiece. And it's becoming less and less attainable to remake that magic. But they really gave the characters like cavernous depths in very little time in that movie, with these flashbacks and with the way they interact with each other. And in this movie, they do that, but I think it's a little less efficient. Like, it takes longer to get not as far. And part of that is just because, like, we don't see these characters interacting with each other presently in the story as much. When we first see Eric and Andrew, it's Win-Win is running up to them to tell them they're being invaded and the action has started. Like, that's how we're introduced to them. So we don't really get to see them interact with each other and their daughter that much. And so that, that to an extent is why. But also, these characters, I think, are just a little less fleshed out than the Signs characters were. Like, in Signs, it felt like he made characters and then he made a story. Here, it's like, okay, well, he has this gay couple and their daughter. What are their names? Let's make a character now. If that makes sense. And maybe that's an unfair criticism, but I'm nitpicking. I'm here to nitpick today, I guess.
No, and I do feel that, in particular, the two men don't have an identity outside of, or I don't think have much of an identity outside of the skeptic and, the sympathetic, more believing character, and their identities as fathers. But I would have to agree, right? They're not as fleshed out as I probably think they should have been. To be fair, the movie is 100 minutes, and in the 100 minutes, I do think it does okay. What I think makes this movie really work for me is everything else. Just the situation at hand and how these two men, with their backgrounds, as kind of vague and maybe not as detailed as we would like them to be, what they do in this really unreal situation, and just what this movie imposes upon its audience. It's a very what would you do movie.
Yeah,
you're constantly thinking about how you would handle this, and putting yourself in these guys' shoes. It's just one of those films that really makes you ask yourself the question, especially when you're watching it right next to your partner, right? As I did. It makes you wonder. It really does. And it makes you talk about it afterwards at dinner. And like in a sick but interesting way. The part that, for me, if I may nitpick now, the part that I didn't really enjoy, and this is so dumb because it's, I think, maybe a not even 5-minute scene in the movie. It's when Eric starts to try to show Andrew the light and tell him that, no, these people are actually here for a reason, and no, this is legit. And he talks about how they're representations of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Oh, yeah. I agree with you.
And
I know what you're saying.
It cuts to each character and describes that horseman. I thought that was incredibly corny, and it really kind of took me out of it.
They weren't horsemen. They were the aspects of human, emotion, and it was anger, compassion, healing, and motherhood, I think, or another one. And
right.
I was like, are those the 4 things that make up a human? Healing.
I haven't played Darksiders in a while.
What?
I haven't played Darksiders in a while, so I have to revisit that.
Yeah.
Is that what those games were called?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, anyway, niche.
Okay, too niche.
But yeah, that didn't work for me, and it took me out of it. And sometimes little things like that are enough to make me think, a movie wasn't great, it was good. And I thought this movie was good. I really liked it. I probably liked it a lot more than you did, or reasonably more than you did, and I liked it more than my fiance did. But I definitely saw its flaws.
Well, I have some more criticisms, so you probably
Please.
definitely liked it more than me.
Keep them coming.
Okay, some of this is like, it made me question how I consume a movie. And I don't think it was intentionally doing that. So I'm not giving them credit for that. But when I first was going to watch this movie, I was skeptical of it being good. I was kind of not sure I really wanted to watch this. The only reason I watched it is because my dad was gonna, and it was on. And I was like, man, we're going to watch M. Night Shyamalan try to write some gay characters and build a plot around it. And I didn't want to watch this movie. I just had no faith in this man's ability to do anything. And because I was like kind of, I thought it would just be like a drag or be annoying or be just not fun to watch. It's something I thought he was going to fail at. And he didn't. He made real characters. But because I kind of had this notion in my mind, going in the movie, I was hyper-analyzing that aspect of the film. And so I have complaints. And they're super nitpicky. Like I said, like I hyper-analyzed this. It was really too focused. But
I mean, it's fair, though. You should go into it.
Yeah. First of all, they're just typical suburban family or whatever. And that's a credit to this movie in some ways because, it makes it like they're a relatable, normal suburban family. And I think that's well and good, but sometimes Eric just feels like a husband and a father. And like, that's it. That's his character. And so it's a little much. And okay, here's the biggest one. Let me drop this on you. And this is, I don't know, maybe more reflective of society at large than just this movie. But think about it. This whole movie's plot is focused around this couple and their daughter. They're the central figures. Leonard, who is Dave Bautista's character, I think a couple points in the movie says, I believe you two have to make this decision because your family is so penultimately showered in love. Like they're truly a happy family. And that's why God has chosen them for this horrible task. So for a movie that's so focused on showing how happy and normal and healthy these characters are and their relationship is and their family dynamic is, for a movie that focused on it, did you notice like how little physical interaction they had? I don't think there was any physical interaction between these husbands. The little girl hug him a little bit, but like this movie ends, let's say the ending right now, with Andrew having to shoot Eric. He kills his husband. It's like a Greek tragedy, but he doesn't kiss him before. Like, think about any movie where any couple is about to lose a member. Like, there's a dramatic kiss and then one of them dies. Like, that's how it would be. That's how that would work, but they're like, they don't touch each other, Why sanitize this if the whole movie is so centered around this couple,
That's fair. I see your perspective there. I don't know why they did that. I don't know if they did it. I hate to say it, but we live in the real world, right? I don't know if they did it because of audiences, American audiences. I don't know if they did it because of M. Night Shyamalan himself. I don't know why. I know that the two actors that play these men are gay, right? I know that they are openly gay men, and M. Night might have done that purposefully so that there was actual representation in the film. Beyond that, I can't really speak to. I mean, I know that I noticed it too.
Well,
I did.
I'll speak to it more.
Because
I
the
think
ending is so tragic, and there is such an absence of physical love between the two men.
No, I think it is because of audiences in the world we live in. I think it absolutely is because...
You think for sure
it
is?
I'm pretty convinced. Yeah, that's why. It's because that's taking it too far. Well, think about, like, just how, I don't know, controversial that would be, or how, like, big it would be. Like, it would be made into a big deal.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is probably why they were apprehensive about it. But like something so simple and realistic as that has become too much to show on film. Like it really
Sure.
is, I don't know, backwards of us, I guess. Cause to say like, well, we're not gonna have them kiss because that's too much for general audiences. But then have the whole movie be about a gay couple, you know?
So here's my question. I mean, this is an interesting conversation. Do you think just make them straight?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
But like,
Then you think just say
just
what
do
to hell
it.
with the
Just
audiences?
really, I mean, like, what? I guess there are some audiences that would do this, but I just find it strange to imagine an audience that goes into a movie about a gay couple, knowing it's a movie about a gay couple, and then are like, "Oh, well, they kissed, and that's too much." Like that's where
People
they draw the
suck.
line. People do suck,
People
but
suck.
even if people suck, I think you should not placate
Yeah.
those people, and you shouldn't satisfy that discomfort. You know, you shouldn't feed into that. That's you're reinforcing negative behavior by not having the basic amount of. Do they even hug? I don't think they hug once. I can't imagine them touching once in the
They
film.
hug. They hug.
Okay,
They
well,
hug and
they
they
hug.
touch. But I don't. You're right. I mean, it's not.
Really small amounts of physical interaction.
Yeah. It's not anything, that I remember off the top of my head or anything impactful or emotionally moving. Yeah. No, I agree. Right. I think do it. Just do it. Like making the movie.
Just do it, right? Yeah. How hard can it be?
No, I just do it. Make the movie.
Yeah.
Also, you're M. Night Shyamalan. Like, here's the truth of the matter. Nobody has less to lose than M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh, yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah, you're right. Well, it's also like, his name has weight. You can, I want to say be bold, but like, it's not really very bold even. It's not a stretch to go from a whole movie about a gay couple and now they kiss. Like, that's not a stretch. It's a very simple, easy thing.
No, you're right. And I'm with you 100%. And I hate to even play that angle, right? And like ask the questions and stuff. But American audiences are rough. And unfortunately, I think a lot of these guys, these big directors and producers, often think about profit over art sometimes. And that sucks. I don't know. That's so interesting that you bring that up because I definitely noticed it, but I didn't really think about it. And you're absolutely right. Now reflecting, it does feel silly. I mean, it feels silly and it feels half-baked. Kind of changes my perspective on it a little bit, for sure.
I know. But I'm so conflicted, right? In criticizing the representation in this movie because, like, it is representation. It's a whole movie of representation, but it fails to be complete. And it just feels weird. I don't want to hate on it for the representation because, like, everything that is there. But also, it's been sanitized. It's been diminished. Yeah. There's still a little bit of unequal. There's a little bit of like discriminatory censorship.
Yeah. Absolutely. I haven't read much into this movie because I knew that I liked it and that it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie. And even if M. Night Shyamalan I'm of the opinion that even if he made a objectively phenomenal, engrossing film, it would have its critics because of just his rep at this point. So I liked it, and I put my head in the sand, ostrich style. I didn't read into it because I was like, you know what, I liked it. I'm not gonna change my mind. I'm just gonna enjoy the wave. This is something I'm gonna look into though. I want to know if anybody has brought up what you're bringing up because I think you make an excellent point. It is sanitized. It is a sanitized gay relationship. It is a American religious conservative sanitized take on a gay couple. It's about as safe as you can get.
Yeah, that's you've put into words what I've been trying to say.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's about as safe as you can get.
Well, and that's why, like, even with the characters, even if they are fleshed out, I feel like they're a little too 50s suburb because they are sanitized and they are supposed to be like the most quote unquote normal American nuclear family you can be. Right. And they're gay, and that's like the fun little diversity point you get, you know?
Yeah.
But there's such a greater conversation to be had that far out scopes this movie. So
Absolutely. And horror doesn't have the best
Yeah.
track record with representation of anyone, truly.
Yeah.
So
You're so right about that.
it comes with unfortunately, sometimes it comes with the territory.
Yeah, I guess you're
But it
right.
shouldn't anymore. And you're right about that, right? Especially with a guy with as much exposure as M. Night Shyamalan, who has already done half of the work by casting two actually gay men in the film. It's a shortcut.
He's done most
And
of
it's
the work.
sloppy.
Like he did most of it, and it's it's like
Yeah.
he ran that
you're
race,
right.
but he wouldn't cross the finish line.
Well, you've given me a lot to think about.
I'm glad I could.
I am going to look into it. I will say this, right? Just to put a button on my thoughts on this movie. I saw its imperfections. I still do, and I will probably see more. This isn't a movie that I see myself rewatching very much. Maybe one more time. But I think, regardless of our levels of enjoyment, you and I can both agree, this is a step up from the things that we've seen M. Night put out recently. And for that, I personally am happy for him, and I'm happy for audiences, because really, we haven't seen a full form M. Night Shyamalan in a very long time. Since Signs, I would argue. And this isn't him yet, but this is indicative of somebody that can still make a good movie. And those are my final thoughts on it.
Yes, I see what you're saying when you said that you're happy for what this movie represents in M. Night's portfolio, at the very least. And I think it is entertaining. Definitely one of the best home invasion movies I've seen. I'm not usually super into those movies, because I don't think they usually have much substance, but this one does have substance to it. I can recommend it for that, at least. I enjoyed this movie. Overall, final thought. Okay, well,
All right.
Yeah, I'm glad we could talk about it. Thank you for joining me, Adrian.
Me too. Yeah, thank you, buddy.
Yeah, thank you everybody for listening. Goodbye.